Greater Media Broadcast News.
Welcome to another edition of Greater Media Broadcast News. I'm Susie Shea, and here are this week's top headlines from Central New Jersey. In what has been dubbed a perfect financial storm, many local towns are feeling the tax pinch caused by abandoned properties. During the recession, many homeowners walked away from their homes. And for the local communities, the results can be unpaid property taxes and neighborhood eyesores. While it is a struggle for any small town to make up the tax revenues of these homes, larger towns like Howell and Monmouth County report as many as 200 problem properties. Howell is among the local towns that are taking action by passing ordinances to keep track of local vacant properties and hold its owners responsible for code violations. Meanwhile, a new law in Matawan requires any homeowner who plans to vacate a property to register with the town, pay a fee, and list those responsible for maintaining the property. Those regulations could soon be imposed statewide as they are included in a bill pending before the state legislature. For more on local town struggles with abandoned properties, see this week's editions of Greater Media newspapers. And here's Mark Rosman with more headlines from this week's papers.
This week's front page article in the news transcript focuses on the Freehold Borough K-8 school district, which is facing a rather difficult situation now and in the future. And that situation is an enrollment that is continuing to grow. While some school districts in our area are seeing their enrollment remain stable or even decrease, Freehold Borough has seen, and projections indicate the district will continue to see, an enrollment increase over the next few years. Right now, the district has about 1,500 students, and projections indicate that within 3 to 4 years, that might increase by about 100 students. In fact, at the present time, Freehold Borough has to rent space from the Freehold Township School District and send its kindergarten students to the neighboring town to be educated. Right now, officials in Freehold Borough are in the early stages of planning for construction that could add infrastructure to the Freehold Borough School District. That brings up the point that sometime in 2014, residents might be asked to go to the polls and vote on a referendum. The outcome of that, well, that would be up in the air. But this is an issue that will remain on the front pages for some time to come.
An event in Edison marked National Recovery Month with the hope that those struggling with drug and alcohol addiction will change their lives for the better. Jessica D'Amico has the story.
20 million people in the U.S. struggle with addiction to alcohol and drugs. The good news is 23.5 million Americans are in recovery for their addictions. This was the focus of a September 26th event in Metuchen marking National Recovery Month. Members of the National Council on Alcohol and Drug Dependence, as well as recovering addicts and a local police officer, addressed the issue of addiction. Speakers called for changes to the current model for dealing with addiction, from one that takes a punitive stance and focuses on prevention and treatment to one that maintains long-term recovery. For more information or to get involved, visit ncaddnewjersey.org.
And here's Mike Pavlichko of Greater Media's WCTC with an update on the Rutgers football team. After that, we have Tim Morris with more on local sports.
Well, Rutgers has waded through the non-conference schedule, and now we're into the American Athletic Conference slate. That, of course, the league that features teams left over from the Big East, some of which are staying, some of which are going, like Rutgers next year. They'll, of course, be in the Big Ten, and some new teams like Houston and Central Florida. Now, Louisville has been the only ranked team in the conference for much of the year, but let's not sell the conference short just yet. I was talking with Central Florida play-by-play man Mark Daniels the other day. The Knights are also in the AAC along with Rutgers, and he said, the league is not quite as bad as the national media portrays it. Now, granted, there are some very good teams, and there are some very poor teams. The league is clearly top-heavy, but even one of the worst, UConn, which recently fired head coach Paul Pasqualoni, they lost to Towson. They lost at Buffalo out of the MAC recently, but you know what? They also gave Michigan a fight out of the Big Ten. Look at the teams Rutgers has to play on the schedule this year in the conference. Louisville, a top 10 team. Cincinnati, a team that has always given Rutgers fits, even going back to the 90s. And even Central Florida, which will be on the schedule, had a 10-0 halftime lead against South Carolina, a top 15 team, lost by a field goal. So the American Athletic Conference may not be the SEC, it may not be the Big Ten, it may not even be the old Big East, but it certainly isn't the Patriot League either. I'm Mike Pavlichko.
Cross-country running is no walk in the park to high school Harriers. In addition to pushing themselves over 3.1 miles, they do it under whatever conditions Mother Nature brings, be it the rain, the cold, the heat, or blustery winds. At the Six Flags Wild Safari Invitational, runners experience something they usually don't encounter. The race course at Six Flags Great Adventure takes the runners through the Wild Safari, where the spectators are lions, buffalo, and other animals there. In the end, it was a race, and getting to the finish line first was the goal of every runner.
How to go from here?
Video is courtesy of The Track Show.
And here's a roundup of headlines from this week's papers. The New Jersey Supreme Court has demanded that the Council on Affordable Housing establish new, more specific requirements for the creation of affordable housing. The court said the current rules allow certain towns to avoid providing affordable housing if there are no market-rate developments being built. The Council has 5 months to draw up the new provisions. Plans for a large-scale retail and housing development in Monroe may wind up in court after the Planning Board voted to deny the plan last week. The marketplace in Monroe called for more than 700 homes and over 100,000 square feet of retail space on Route 33, but it was met with staunch opposition from residents. Though board members cited concerns about the impact on schools and traffic, the developer's attorney said those are not permissible reasons to dismiss an application. North Brunswick may follow the lead of several New Jersey towns by imposing a ban on pet stores selling animals from so-called puppy mills. According to the local Humane Society, the ordinance would show that the community is animal-friendly. Officials say the legislation would not affect existing stores whose pets come from reputable breeders. Next week marks National Newspaper Week. Look for a column by our executive editor, Donna Kenyon, in next week's editions of Greater Media Newspapers. And as always, for more details about any of these stories and additional coverage, see your Greater Media newspaper today. And now Amy Rosen has a story about an event in Metuchen that encourages us to think about the different ways we can use urban spaces.
Many municipalities in central New Jersey are wrestling with the issue of making their streets more pedestrian-friendly. The borough of Metuchen is taking the lead by proposing a complete streets policy that will consider the planning of streets from more than just a vehicular perspective.
I support the Parking Day today. It is a great way to bring awareness to people of our initiative of complete streets. The Borough Council now is developing a policy that will include bicyclists, pedestrians, and cars in our plan to make the streets available for everybody.
Hi, I'm Sean Massey with Bike Walk Metuchen, and we're here as part of Parking Day, which is an international event where community groups come out and they take over a metered parking spot in their downtown and they repurpose the space for an alternative use versus car parking. So you can see here we've created a little mini parklet where you got places to sit down, relax, and it's really meant to raise a discussion about how we use our shared public space. You know, do you always use it for parking cars, or maybe you want to have, you know, space for a park or a place to hang out, read a book, or any use you can think of. You're limited really by your imagination.
This is Amy Rosen for Greater Media Newspapers.
Sandy Hook in Monmouth County is among the national parks forced to close as a result of the federal government shutdown. And around 14,000 federal employees at New Jersey facilities are getting furlough notices. Not everyone is happy about the shutdown. Here's About a Minute with Greg Bean.
There was a delicious rumor floating around last week that Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel were planning a reunion concert on the steps of the Capitol October 1st, the first day of the government shutdown, kicked off by a stirring rendition of The Sounds of Silence. I'm told they abandoned the scheme when they learned that although the shutdown could have a real negative impact on millions of Americans, it won't be particularly silent in that neighborhood since the shutdown won't affect members of Congress and the lion's share of their staffs, who will continue getting paid and funded no matter how long the stupid thing goes on. The whole business was brought about by members of Congress, each with a base salary of $175,000 a year and a portfolio of gold-plated perks, bound and determined to derail the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. And while I'm sure you've seen dozens of bloviators telling us what a catastrophe it'll be when it goes into effect, here's something I'll bet you didn't know. For decades, members of Congress and their staffs have been able to get health insurance through the Federal Employee Health Benefits Program, the same one available to all federal employees, and the government picked up 75% of their premiums. They really like that plan, even though it closely resembles Obamacare when it comes to competing companies and exchanges, and even served as a model for the Affordable Care Act. What they didn't like was a recent amendment by Republican Senator Chuck Grassley that would have forced senators, representatives, and staffers to buy their insurance through the new exchanges rather than the federal system most employees use, but without the 75% subsidy. I guess he wanted folks who support Obamacare to have a personal stake in the outcome. That, unfortunately, blew up in his face. Republican and Democratic lawmakers set up such a hue and cry about having to forego the subsidy for themselves and the staffers that they compromised and passed legislation last month that would continue the 75% taxpayer contribution to their health care. A hypocritical double standard? Sure sounds like one to me. And it's something to keep in mind the next time you hear someone like that windbag Ted Cruz droning on and on about what a disaster it will be if average Americans start getting addicted to the government assistance he and his staffers and colleagues and their staffers have so far neglected to decline. I'm Greg Bean for Greater Media Newspapers.
And here's Gloria Stravelli with an update on the local art scene.
The Monmouth Museum continues the New Jersey Emerging Artist Series this fall with an exhibitive work by artist Bill Ross of Point Pleasant. Bill Ross, Aesthetic Curiosities, gives the viewer a hint of what they'll be viewing in the Nilsson Gallery at the museum. Using his preferred medium of graphite and charcoal pencils, Ross combines the discipline of classically inspired draftsmanship and takes an imaginative leap into surreal imagery. He often juxtaposes contemporary subjects with creatures from antiquity in his work. Ross explains that he grew up in a home filled with books, and he would pore over the volumes in search of illustrations, which left an indelible impression on him. Books like Alice in Wonderland and Dr. Seuss's quirky work. But he says the most profound impact on him was the work of 19th century French illustrator Gustave Doré, working in black and white pencil. Ross will share insights into his artwork and his life at a gallery talk at the museum on October 9th between 7 and 8 p.m. The event is free and open to the public, and the museum is located on the campus of Brookdale Community College in Lincroft. You can see Ross's work in our newspapers and on this website. Send us news of arts events in your community, and remember to support the arts. They add zest to your life.
Hundreds of law enforcement officers, public officials, and family and friends joined together to celebrate the memory of former Red Bank Police Chief Stephen McCarthy at his funeral last week. McCarthy died on September 23rd after serving the Red Bank community for almost 3 decades. Here's a photo montage of the funeral by Greater Media photographer Eric Sukar. This is Susie Xie. Thanks for tuning in.